Thank you. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Marina Cvetkovic. She's a member of BoardStrong's board of directors. She's also an award-winning leadership advisor and executive coach with senior businesses. She's official member of the Forbes Coaches Council and executive board member of Fast Company and a TEDx speaker. So take it away, Marina. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Barbara, and welcome everyone. I am so thrilled to be here. I am focusing on boards quite a bit in my work as a board member, but also as a board advisor and executive coach. And I find that there is a lot of talk about gender diversity in the past few years, but there is not enough talk about generational diversity, which I think is becoming more and more critical, given that, a lot of the industries are being disrupted and legacy thinking is losing a little bit of relative importance compared to new, fresh, disruptive, more future-oriented, next-gen type of thinking. And so I think we can move the needle here, and it is going to be a journey. But I think conversations like this are an important contribution to that movement. So delighted to be here. And I have here with me Melissa, Emily, and Sarah, and excited to hear all of your inputs. And I'm going to let all of you introduce yourselves. And when you do that, please share, what boards are you currently on, so that the audience knows.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you, Marina, and everyone at BoardStrong, Barbara, and Eken for having us and myself today. So I am Melissa Keith. I am from Abbey, Mecca and Company. We are a full-service PR advertising marketing firm here in Buffalo, New York. So I have background with media buying for about 15 years, and a lot of our clients, my biggest client is actually a nonprofit. So I have that background. And then the boards that I am currently on is Family Promise of Western New York. And that is one of two emergency family shelters here in Erie County. And I got started working with them kind of last year, and then I was asked to be on their board the end of last year. So I just started this year on that board. And then the second board is VIA, which is the Visually Impaired Advancement Services and Agency here in Buffalo. And they were formerly the Olmsted Center of Sight. And I was actually approached by a current board member looking for a younger and more diverse member. So I was asked to be on that, so I was accepted. So again, I started that in January. So I'm a newbie to the board members, but to the board meetings. But
Great, welcome, Melissa.
Hi, my name is Emily Cote. I am currently a marketing consultant for Vocation Media, which is an organization that I actually just started, providing consulting to nonprofits and small businesses in marketing, communications, and branding. If I look familiar, it's because I did also spend over 4 years as the Vice President of Communications for the New York Council of Nonprofits. And before that, I've spent the majority of my career in the nonprofit sector and other mission-focused organizations. In regard to my board service, I am actually not currently on a board. I am seeking a new board position. I took some time off because I had a daughter a couple years ago and wanted some time to focus on my family, but she's going to be heading into preschool. So I feel like that kind of frees up a little more bandwidth on my part. But before that, I was a board member for Capital Roots, which is a food access organization in the Capital region. And I've also been on the board at Margin Nation and the Association of Contingency Planners. So I have, quite a bit of board experience, and I think I have a better idea now of what I'm looking for in the future. So thanks.
Welcome, Emily.
Hello, my name is Serra Eken. I am the Managing Director of Development and the Pink Agenda at the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. The Pink Agenda is a sister organization and a strategic partner of BCRF that is committed to raising money for breast cancer research and care. as well as awareness about breast cancer amongst young professionals. In my role, I oversee the financial health, development strategies, corporate partnerships, governance, and operational management, as well as the organizational growth of the Pink Agenda. I have served in numerous volunteer nonprofits throughout my life since I was quite young. So I knew at some point I wanted to be on a board. I joined the New York Junior League when I was 24 years old and was elected to the board of directors as executive vice president at the age of 34. I currently am on the board again as a director at large and have been elected as president of the board, when my term will begin in July. Since 2015, I've also had the privilege of serving on other nonprofit boards and junior boards as well. I currently also serve on the WP Theater's board of directors, which I joined through BoardStrong in July of 2021.
Great, welcome, Sarah. So some of you briefly touched on it, but I would like to still ask the question, how did you get your first board seat? What did that look like?
Okay, I'll jump in. So for Family Promise of Western New York, so I had started, I got introduced to the organization last year. So I was around 34, so I joined the board when I was 35. But I started donating and helping them out and volunteering. So I wasn't necessarily on a committee yet. I wasn't on a board, but I just loved their message and their goal and their mission. So I wanted to help out in any way I could. And that got the attention of the director there. And then I got asked to be on their fund development committee. That was spring of last year. And then I was helping out with that, with fundraisers, just getting gift cards, together for their fundraisers and things like that. And then the end of last year, then the president of the board approached me and asked if I would like to be on the board of trustees. So, you kind of walked yourself in and you worked your way into it. And so that would be, a recommendation I would even have for younger, potential board members is if there's an organization that you love and you have a passion for, just start volunteering. It's not necessarily you're going for the board opportunity, but just get yourself out there and, you never know who's looking or watching. And, if you're posting on social media and you're at an event and, you just want to help them out, that's going to get the attention of them. So yeah, that's how I got my first start.
Yeah, I love that. Working your way in. It's definitely a great way to earn credits, but also for you to do a little bit of due diligence on the organization, right? Because you get to know them better as well. And by the time they asked you, I'm pretty sure you had clarity on whether or not that's an organization you want to dive deeper into and continue supporting, in a much more committed way, which is a board position, right?
Right. Yeah. It's that passion too. I definitely think, you're an interest in it, but you have to have a passion in it. And like I said, I just loved the story of their organization as a whole and the history of it. So, you wanted to help out as much as you could.
Great. Thank you, Melissa.
I'm going to piggyback off of that. I'm pretty much in the same boat. I gave my time volunteering in different efforts, specifically in fundraising areas, even chairing events, chairing other fundraising initiatives for many years before I even thought about even joining the board. I was more into doing work for an organization. And then I realized my passion could lead to joining the board and making a larger strategic impact, serving on a board.
So were you then approached and you started volunteering?
I was approached. Yeah, I was approached. Yeah. So after giving so much time, the recognition of now that you've given so much time, would you consider applying for this position and being a part of our organization deeper?
Yeah. Fantastic. Emily, I believe you also have one not so successful story. I hope you will share that.
Yes, yeah. My first experience on a board was actually a great learning experience. We'll call it that. So I was actually approached by the organization and they asked me if I wanted to join their board. And it became clear only after I joined the organization that, quite frankly, neither one of us did our due diligence and like looking into each other's background. They thought my career background was a little different based on the name of the organization I worked with at the time, the Commission on Economic Opportunity. They thought I was in like business development, but I wasn't. We were actually a like social services organization, and I didn't quite like, I was just so flattered that someone was asking me to join their board because I was, 20 something and, out there trying to grow my career. And I was like, sure. And then I realized afterwards I had no professional experience whatsoever with what they were dealing with. Now, they were great people and I learned a lot. I learned all about like denial of service attacks and things like that because they were focused on business continuity. But I realized after, I think a little over a year that I was not the best fit for the role. And I actually had a friend who was in like her whole career was in disaster preparedness. And so I actually brought her on the board to take my place. So.
Oh, that's a great story. It's a great story. And I mean, a great reminder that just because you're being asked to join a board, that does not guarantee the success of that relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And so tell us more about what has your board experience been like so far, and maybe particularly with that kind of generational diversity lens, because I know the boards that you're serving on or you served on are quite different. Some of them rather young, some of them a little bit more on the senior side. So tell us about that experience and what is it like to be the younger voice, let's say, in the boardroom.
Want me to go there? So with Family Promise, I feel like it's pretty diverse in the generational. Obviously, it was an opportunity that I couldn't resist because I was already volunteering my time, so I kind of knew the gist of the background of the company and the organization. So, but with that, I've only been there since January, but. And I know Serra kind of touched on how she's kind of involved with the governance part of nonprofit. So, 2 weeks ago, there was a board meeting and a very heavy subject came up and it's, you're voting on, the with employees and that kind of stuff. And you're voting on it. And that's when it's like a serious part of it. It's not just, okay, we're going to approve time from this board meeting and fundraising efforts. It was just like, kind of had to sit back, and that's where you have to be passionate about it. And I think you have to be present in each board meeting, not just physically, but mentally, because there's going to be topics that come up that you have to be kind of prepared to really fully understand. And if you don't know much about it, you have to ask questions. I think that's my biggest thing is like, I'm not afraid to ask questions. Especially with something like this, because they're relying on your opinions and your voice and what you think about it and your stance on a lot of those. So I think that's it was kind of eye-awakening because of course you're sitting there and you're, everyone's just smiling and then okay, next agenda. And it's just like, oh, wow. Like, okay, this is what the nitty gritty basically of a nonprofit and what they have to deal with. So and then VIA, they're a little bit older. So obviously, it's a younger, I think it's me and another gentleman that joined the board. And, and there were some questions that I was asking and a lot of them were like, oh, well, we didn't think of we didn't think of that before. So that's kind of like seeing that and that you're asking these questions that might spark another conversation or insight from one of the older board members. So I think it's been nice. It's been refreshing, I think, for these boards to have someone, younger on it. So yeah.
Great. I think what you just shared, Melissa, is such a nice reminder for our audience here and generally, right, for people aspiring to get on boards. because we often say that next generation or younger generation gets very excited and enthusiastic and maybe a little bit over optimistic,
Yeah.
right, about the type of impact they can have in the shortest amount of time. And there is a risk of forgetting about the governance part, right, on that journey. And the governance part and oversight is really a big part and a huge part of the board's role, right? And so making sure that you're ready for that,
Right.
and ready for the meetings so that
Yes.
you can give a meaningful vote is critical. Great, thank you.
I'm happy to go. I'm happy to give the perspective of as somebody who brings on board members in my professional career a little bit too, and then how I've entered into boardrooms, knowing how I manage that situation. So I think, as Marina said, the governance part is very important, and making sure everybody understands what our best practices are is number one. So I make sure when new board members are coming on, aside from a larger orientation that we provide them about going through our bylaws, our other best practice policies, is making sure they understand who the board is, what everybody is bringing to the table, as well as what we're asking them to bring to the table. So when I just joined the WP Theaters board, my way about going into it was I did research. I looked up all the board members and who they are and what they do. And the magic of Google now is remarkable, and what they're bringing to the table, and trying to understand my role of why I'm at the table as well. And asking the right questions, making sure you have a connection with the staff as well as other board members going in, I think is really helpful. No matter if you're a young professional going into the boardroom or anybody, your first board meeting, no matter what, is intimidating, not knowing anybody, but making sure you know as many people as possible and making those connections, I think, is the most important thing, to be able to have open and honest conversation, which is what happens in a boardroom, and feeling comfortable to speak your mind.
Yeah. And Sarah, one of the boards you currently serve on is quite young, right?
No, so I run a young board. So my board that I manage for work is all young professionals. So our board members are between the age of 25 and 45. So it is definitely the millennial age group, maybe even a little bit younger. But we focus on, one of the things I focus on in regards to, in addition to preparing them, is actually training them for being future board members in other nonprofits as they age out of my organization, and developing, I say, we're developing the next generation of philanthropists in this world.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. That's great. It's so refreshing to hear. And also that, you know, it sounds like you've been having good experience with that board. You've been getting great value out of it. Yeah. Thank you.
So I think I've thought about this, and I'd say the most valuable thing that I have gotten out of board service is that, you know, I've spent the majority of my career on the staff side of nonprofit operations. And, you know, when you're staff, you're dealing with the day-to-day, you know, what fires need to be put out, what's the situation, you're talking about, you know, program delivery and things like that. And, you know, the board experience has definitely allowed me to get a broader, longer view of organizations and sort of like, you know, their opportunities to grow and what the, you know, the landscape looks like, and, you know, also seeing the different, you know, the different things that are at play that staff don't ordinarily get to see. So that has definitely been really eye-opening. And it's also been good for me to, you know, sit down and hear the other perspectives when we're having open discussion, because at board meeting, the level of open discussion that you can have is very different than when you're sitting around a staff table. So, you know, that has been really enlightening and has helped me develop a better appreciation for the other side of things and what goes into making long-term strategic decisions, you know, on behalf of an organization.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Emily. And you're bringing up some great points around what's the value of joining a board for potential board candidates, right? Why join a board? It definitely does, you know, offer a very different perspective on even the business and the operations that maybe you used to know from operational side, right? From a staff perspective, as you say. And what do you think now, having had this experience, right? And the, you know, kind of somewhat varied degrees of success, let's say, in terms of the integration and inclusion, what do you think the boards need to kind of keep in mind as they're, you know, as they're sort of recruiting and onboarding younger generation, millennial kind of board candidates? What would be important to make this a success and to really have that inclusion element, right? So not just tick the box and say, great, we have a millennial board member, but on diversity, but really fully benefit from that diverse voice in the boardroom.
So I was thinking about this, and hopefully don't mind me jumping in, but I would say for me, the biggest thing has been to recognize like the phase of life that millennials tend to be in and how different that might be from older board members in terms of both like the, you know, the financial resources that they may have available and like the liquidity there. And then also, you know, what their time commitments may look like, because, you know, trying to make board meetings that are at 4 o'clock or something like that, if I'm also trying to do daycare pickup, or, you know, recognizing that like, you know, in this stage, like most millennials, they're trying to grow their career. They're probably paying off student debt, maybe large amounts of student debt. They may be raising young families. And so I think the timing of board meetings might look a little different for what works best for millennials. And then also like looking at your give get and how that is phrased and whether or not that's accessible for people in our age group, like based on the phase of life that we're in.
Yeah, great points, Emily, like just considering the life circumstances and the phase. I love how you phrased that, because it is very different. And in fact, it probably aligns with the comment that we have in the chat, right? Saying that, you know, time commitments are challenging, right? And of course, arguably, you know, millennials are still in a very dynamic career phase. That means a lot of change, and that change may change their circumstances in a way that affect their ability to contribute to a board, right? So they may not be able to honor the tenure that maybe someone in a more stable phase is able to honor. Great. What else?
Yeah, kind of just, I guess, piggybacking off of Emily, it's that whole who you're looking at, and obviously where they're in, you know, professionally and personal life. But also, I think looking at their organization, you know, whether it's their mission, their goal, obviously that hasn't changed, but it's changed versus how you're getting that message out to the community and to those donors, if you need donors, which I think every nonprofit needs funds for the donors. So it's versus 20 years ago, how you were doing that and who was on your board and how you were getting those board members versus now, you know, it is different. So I think maybe taking that step back and actually looking at, you know, okay, yes, we know that it hasn't really generally changed of how we want to get that out for the organization, but, you know, who we're using. And I think that's always a good thing to keep in mind, and, you know, what backgrounds they have. You know, I've noticed a few of the nonprofits, I think they're seeking more people in a marketing background, marketing, digital, you know, to help with that, give recommendations of, you know, we don't have advertising funds, but we need help with getting a PR release, a release out. We need help with an email newsletter, but we don't have the funds. We don't have a person to do that. But hey, if we had someone on the board, that could help us out. So I think you're seeing maybe a diverse of not just generational, but who and what backgrounds they have. I think is key to really look at that and not just having, okay, finance, we need a CPI on the board. No, look further than that because it's changed. The times have changed basically, and so yeah.
Definitely. I mean, the importance of marketing and I think, Melissa, what you're pointing out to is also adapting that messaging so that it is speaking more to kind of the next generation of leaders as a general audience, right? And also as potential board candidates. It's important.
I would just say, I was actually talking to a colleague about this morning over coffee, which is really interesting, about similar to like give gets and roles on the board. I think it's setting the expectation early in conversations and annually too, is like what you're bringing to the table. You may not be able to bring something financially, you may not be able to make all the board meetings, but this is what you're offering and this is what the organization is expecting of you. In a way, and having that open dialogue, whether it's with your board president or chair or with the executive director, and having an understanding of what your role is and what you're bringing, like Melissa said, the marketing experience, or even the legal experience, or the community experience, whatever it may be, setting those parameters early on and having everybody on the board understand each other's role, I think is very helpful with that. Again, millennials, again, are family priority, work is priority, and that's for everybody too. But it's when you have those boundaries set in advance and those expectations both ways from both the board and the board member and the organization, I think it's easier to manage overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. We have a question, but before I go to that question, we have a comment as well, which is basically saying that, yes, I mean, it's very interesting. I'm not going to read it all, but all the adjustments that, some of the boards are making to make the environment more friendly for younger generations and make it more flexible. And Priscilla is saying it's really paying forward, right? And those board members do get older. And they stay committed if you create the right environment. The question is, as a younger board member, maybe new board member, have you ever experienced pushback from older board members who've been at the board for a long time or organization for a long time? And how did you handle that? And how could the organization have helped with that?
I can't really speak on this because I've only been on the board since January, so I'll probably maybe leave that to Emily or Sarah. So
Yeah.
I would say when you come with ideas to the table, no matter what, for pushback or not pushback, is coming with facts and coming with options, right? So sometimes it may not be what you think is the best idea, but laying out a plan, say, this is an idea I have, this is why we should move forward with it. And I think these are our options, but this is the best option. And having discussion around that and listening to feedback. I think coming with an idea doesn't mean your idea is always the best idea, but listening to feedback on what is the best for the organization. And having input is important both ways, and having everybody listening at the table is the most important thing. Sometimes what I've done before coming to an idea to the board meeting is I'd actually talk to some other board members and say, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. Is this something the board would be willing to listen to or accept? And having some backing before you go in and bring a topic up, sometimes works as well. And those connections, it's making those connections in advance, which helps. Having those buddies to like talk through ideas out before coming with ideas is usually helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of socializing the idea, but also otherwise, right? Just really building those connections outside of the boardroom is critical. Emily, what about you? Any pushbacks, and how do you handle that?
So in my experience, actually, for the most part, the boards have been pretty open and welcoming to new ideas and things like that, which I think is really great from a cultural perspective. And I actually, I saw more pushback, I think, from the executive directors often. But I think that more comes down to just board dynamics and, what's possible, what's not, because we're always looking at it through a different lens. And I can totally appreciate that, as having also served on the staff side. What I will say, though, is I think a lot of times I have seen millennials get pigeonholed into specific tasks or specific things because, the board looks at them and they're like, well, they're young, they're techie, they're going to like doing this, rather than like asking them, like, what do they want to get out of the board experience? Because I did find that a lot. Now I recognize like some of it comes down to like professional experience and what you have knowledge of and things like that. But I would have actually been really interested to sit on a committee, developing the board. And I wasn't asked to sit on that committee. I was asked to sit on, the marketing and communications committee, or, later a policy committee, because that was my background. And so I would say, like, rather than assuming what, folks might want to get out of a board experience, or just looking at their resume and saying, we're going to put them on X committee, having more of that dialogue to find out, like, what is it that they're hoping to get out of the board, and see if you can make that experience possible. That's where I would say that I actually saw more of that sort of generational divide, is just sort of assuming that I would be good at something or interested in something because of my age.
Yeah. I love that you said that, Emily, and also, we often talk about whether or not the board should really be hands-on, right? And it kind of depends a little bit on the size of the organization and also what the board members want. And sometimes board members are fine to be hands-on, and when that's contracted like that, it could lead to a good outcome, right? Even though it's not, Barbara would argue, and I would agree, that that's generally not the best practice, right? We want the board members to keep their hands off, but keep their, involvement from a more strategic level. But whether or not we do that, it should not differ depending on the generation, right? And there may be a little bit of a tendency to put the younger members more to work, because of their experience and all of that. And that really shouldn't be the case, right? If you're a board member, you're a board member just like anyone else in that room. And therefore your contribution should be at the same level, right? Cool. Any advice on how to recruit younger board members? So maybe attract and recruit. What would be good ways to do that? And I think Melissa spoke a little bit about adjusting the messaging, just thinking about your messaging to begin with. But what are good ways to recruit younger board members? What do you think?
Well, so I maybe looking out into your public and different nonprofits, such as this. So Barbara got a hold of Althea, who runs Leadership Buffalo here, and I went through that program last year, and that is actually how I came to find out about Family Promise. And then Althea actually sits on the board for VIA, and she asked me to be on that board. So, looking out in your community, and not just, it might be a nonprofit across the street, in a different city, even just localized leadership programs, BoardStrong, any type of those programs where you have these up and coming younger professionals. Even this year, I'm doing YPOP, which is a program under the Buffalo Conservancy here in Buffalo. So that's another program, and they're all young professionals. And so you already know, going into this group of people, they're already determined, they're already driven, to do it, and they're doing their due diligence for the program that they're going through. So, just asking around, word of mouth is, as we all know, is the best way to get answers to things like that. So, work with what you got. We all have a platform. So, as much as I was talking about volunteering and Serra too, and with these organizations is when you share on your Instagram, that's a platform that organization might have never gotten a hold of or through. So just, if you don't have, again, the funds to do that, I would just, word of mouth and ask who you know, because it's, 9 out of 10, you're going to get someone that's going to be right for your board. So.
Yeah, I love that, Melissa. And by the way, BoardStrong has a board matching platform. And I think, Serra, you found one of the board roles were through the BoardStrong, and same for me, actually. Now, what I'm not sure about, Barbara, is on the platform, are we able to kind of see the age of the candidates? Like, let's say if a board is really targeting millennials, are our organizations able to see the age groups?
You hear me? Yes.
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 Okay.
It's a question that's asked. It's Serra can talk a little bit about her experience, but for everybody around here, you can search by region, by town, any kind of diversity. People put their skills and their interests, so you can narrow down the age, profession, all of those things.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I put a link to a video that we did on using it into the chat. Fantastic.
Thank you, Barbara. So board matching platforms are definitely a way as well. What else, Emily, Serra, what else could an organization be thinking about if they're looking to attract younger board members?
So one thing we've focused on a little bit is professional networks. So there are, and also alumni groups that people are a part of, and talking about our organization and posting on alumni group platforms. So if we know, for my board at the Pink Agenda, we have a bunch of people who went to UPenn, for example. And we, depending on where we are in our recruitment cycle, and if we need board or leadership council members, we do sometimes ask them to post on their alumni networks or their board, like if they're in alumni like communication groups. That has worked for multiple schools. We've done that, which has been really helpful, especially getting younger people involved. One thing we do differently is we also go out and talk about our organization. We say, we have a program where we, it's kind of like a mini orientation. We talk about what we do. We talk about breast cancer, why it's important to bring awareness about what we do to this demographic, and try to go into companies as well, like larger companies, to talk about them. Mini orientation companies, the big banks have women's groups, or is something that we've focused on with the Pink Agenda as well, going in and talking about the organization, and it has been a very successful recruitment tool. So looking at your networks other than like your personal networks, but your professional and educational networks is some way to recruit as well.
Great. Thank you, Serra.
I would say, I would piggyback back on what Melissa and Serra have said. My first introduction to board service, at least from like a presentation perspective, was actually through one of those leadership programs through our regional Chamber of Commerce. So that was sort of the first time that it was presented to me in a way that was like, and you can do this too. And I was like, wait, I could be a board member. So I think that those types of programs are really valuable. The other thing that I would say too, again, just, coming from the nonprofit sector, is within your own organization, making sure that you're encouraging a culture that, supports your people going out there and also becoming board members and serving on boards. Because again, I think it can only lead to professional growth for them. And as long as there's no conflict of interest there, I think that it can be really valuable. And I have been very, grateful to the different employers that I've had over the years that have encouraged that. So I think if you're at a nonprofit organization and you have staff, who are interested, encouraging that, it helps to grow sort of the local community at that level.
Thank you, Emily. I love that. Like, also think about how you're fostering that culture in your organization, because it goes both ways, right? We have a question from Freddie. So Freddie is asking a question on onboarding. Onboarding is always an interesting topic. So what is your experience? Did the boards that you joined have a structured onboarding process? If so, maybe tell us an example of what a good one looked like, where you felt like, wow, I really feel like I'm well onboarded, like I know what I'm doing here, I can contribute pretty quickly. And just generally, what advice do you have in terms of how to integrate the new board members as quickly as possible?
I'm happy to start.
Yes.
So recently when I joined the WP Theater, I think onboarding starts at the recruitment level, like talking about the organization at a deeper level for people having an understanding before they even go through the nominating process, to make sure that this is something that they want to do, which I felt I very much appreciated, and getting to know leadership prior to actually being elected. As well, I think onboarding is very important. We had a full orientation for all the new board members, including the senior staff and executive members of the board, going through, like, getting to know each other a little bit more, what they do within the organization, as well as going through a board handbook. And that's past financials, past board minutes, topics that have come up in the past couple of years at board meetings that potentially would strategically change some stuff within the organization. I think during COVID, I think there had been a lot of conversation. So with that, understanding what those are before going into your first board meeting is very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, so with the two boards that I'm on, VIA, we did go in for an introduction, but as Sarah was bringing up in that whole recruiting stage, I was able to take a tour of the facility and actually get to know the director and, learn more about it. It wasn't just to sit down and watch a presentation. No, like she walked you through the agency and really, I got to meet some of the employees and the staff. So, I think nowadays people understand it's that personal, everyone's human and we need to know, like, she's human, he's human, it's not just this organization, it's not just a building, like, there's people doing the work of the organization and you really need to know that and understand that. And then we did have formal sit down orientation with I think the 3 other members. So, obviously, as Sarah was bringing up again, getting to know them, and what Emily said, in the board meeting, you're all just like we're doing now, you're having a conversation, you're getting to know these people, because everyone has different opinions, different perspectives, different backgrounds. So you need to really understand that and get to know those people. And then with Family Promise, as I stated before, I was kind of working my way in, so I already knew them last year. But it was nice that the president of the board did reach out, and he did, you felt appreciated when you did get an email from him or a call saying, we really appreciate all the support that you've given to this organization. It hasn't gone unnoticed. We've noticed it. Thank you so much. It's kind of like they're flirting. When you like someone, you're like, oh my God, the dress is so cute on you. It's the same thing, it's Melissa, oh my God, I love your stance on generational equity. Hey, you want to join the board? So it kind of goes both ways. That, flirt with them, make them feel good. It's nice to be sought after, and that what you're doing professionally, and with volunteering, it's getting noticed, it makes you feel good. And I think for everyone, it always makes you feel good when someone gives you a compliment or you feel appreciated, and definitely being sought after, which I think all of us have been asked to be on a board, which is a great, great honor. So, so I think it is.
Thank you, Melissa. Emily, any advice?
Sure. I mean, I would say, my time at Capital Roots is a, larger organization than some, and they definitely have a really robust onboarding process in place. You had to join, you know, an advisory committee and like serve for at least a year, I think, before they would invite you to join the board. So, you know, by then you have a pretty good handle on the organization. And then on top of it, like you would sit down with the board president, they'd go over the bylaws, you'd talk about give, get, and then they actually had a shadowing program too. So then you would be assigned a partner board member that could kind of be your buddy. And you could reach out to them anytime with questions and, you know, observations and things like that. And they were usually someone who, you know, wasn't a long-standing board member, but someone who had been on for maybe 2 years, like half a term. So like they still remembered what it was like to be new, but they had enough experience that they could say, oh, you know, this is how it works. And, you know, this is kind of how you integrate and things like that. So I thought that was really valuable.
So I was going to ask, how was that shadowing experience? Did you really get value out of it? Did you take advantage of it? Did you reach out?
I did a little. I will say, like, the downside of it comes down to when it's one person like that, it really comes down to whether or not your schedules align. And so we would run into that challenge a lot. That said, you know, my board experience there was great. I made friends there. And over time, you know, when I had questions and things like that, there were plenty of other people that I felt comfortable like pulling aside afterwards and asking questions or being like, hey, did that go how you expected? Or, you know, what have you. So, you know, I think that, you know, my best advice to new board members would just be, you know, try not to be shy, and there are no stupid questions, because in the beginning, like I did a lot of, because I didn't want to look like I wasn't knowledgeable, I did a lot of like nodding, and, you know, you get to a point where, you know, you have to look at the financials, you have to be talking about staffing issues, you're talking about policies, and like, you can't be shy. You have an obligation to serve the organization. And that means using your voice when you need to.
Yes, absolutely. You can only nod so much, right? And at some point. Yeah, fantastic. So kind of related to this, but there was a question from Dave on kind of more formal board training. So have you ladies leveraged any like Board Source or United Way or any other type of kind of board readiness, let's say, training to get you ready and prepared for your board service?
So I'm actually in the midst of doing the United Way training. So I started that after I got accepted in the 2 boards, because I was like, well, I'm not really prepared. I need to like know more. As you know, Emily was saying, there's a lot of things that you're gonna find out that you really don't know. And that's okay. You know, it's okay, but to be ready on the stance of the governance side and the policies and understanding what their expectations are for you, and vice versa. So I think doing this training, and hopefully I think it's starting back up the early April, I think, but that's the United Way training that I'm going to be doing. So I'm not fully done with it yet, but I just started that. So definitely take advantage of those. Talk to your employee and you know, do those. And even like the leadership program that I did last year, those kind of things help also with confidence. And you know, personally and professionally. So, and networking, you know, it's who you know these days. So that'll help you as well. So
yeah, fantastic. So Melissa, you have some experience with the United Way. What about you, Sarah and Emily? Have you leveraged any of those?
So the New York Junior League used to have a program called Nonprofit Board Clearinghouse, which used to be a full board training program that lasted about 3 to 4 months. And then at the end, if you'd like to be placed on a board, they placed you on a board. There was like a recruitment initiative after. So I did go through that program in 2014, 13. I don't remember exactly, but yes, prior to joining my first board, I did go through a training program.
And do you encourage your board members today to attend any of the programs?
So I don't always, It's not a requirement to do some sort of program, but I do, when I find programs online, or if I see any great webinars or online training programs, I do send it to them to say, I highly encourage you take part, listen in. It's for your training, for your current board placement, as well as your future leadership, for future leadership opportunities, but it is not mandatory.
Yeah, it's we could talk about board training even broader than just as part of the onboarding, because arguably also events like this, even the long-standing board members, can get a lot of value out of attending. There's a ton of webinars out there about kind of what's currently happening in the regulation space or governance space, or just generally, talent trends like this, right? So the ongoing education, ongoing board education is also a topic here. What about you, Emily? Any experience with board trainings?
Well, I was gonna say, like, I kind of cheated in the way that, like, I spent 4 years working at Nikon. So if there was ever a wealth of information about good governance practices, I was exposed to it both through Nikon and through BoardStrong as an affiliate. So I sat on many a training. I moderated many a training. I worked with Barbara. BoardStrong has an onboarding program with like an actual evaluation at the end, and worked on putting together a new version of the video for that and the assessment for that and things like that. So I actually credit both Nikon and BoardStrong for giving me such an in-depth education on good governance.
Great. Thank you for that. And I think we only have a few minutes left. And I think as we're closing, I'm curious, what advice do you have and you want to leave our audience with, particularly those that are perhaps aspiring board candidates? What advice would you have for those kind of trying to get on their first board or thinking about getting on their first board?
Just put yourself out there. You have to be willing, you have to show that you're doing your due diligence. And, as we've all kind of talked about, it could be something as, you see an organization, whether it's, a shelter or, SPCA, if you love animals, go and just, hey, can I volunteer? Is there any way I can help? Or it could be the other, if there's a leadership program and you want to take that initiative and applying to do that. But definitely, I would say put yourself out there, and you can't be shy, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and and go for it.
Yes, go for it.
My advice is be passionate about what you're doing. You are a volunteer on the board. You are giving your time. So make sure you're passionate about what you're doing, because it is a time commitment, and to commit the time, you should love it and know it and be a part of it. It should be a part of you. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Sarah.
For new board members, I would say have realistic expectations. I think that, and again, I know I'm kind of going over this ad nauseum, but I have a lot of experience on the staff side. And I know there are a lot of board members that come on and they're so excited and they're like, we talked about this 3 weeks ago. Why hasn't it been done yet? And so just recognizing the operational side of things, and that, real change, it's happening, it takes time, and just because your great idea hasn't, seen the light yet doesn't mean that it won't eventually, but there are a lot of times, a lot of other factors that are at play. So I would say, definitely bring your energy and bring your ideas, but, recognize that, nonprofits aren't built all on, passion for the mission. They also have a lot of logistics that are at play too.
Oh, a lot. I mean, in fact, they first need to handle all the logistics, right, before to make sure that it's sustainable. And but I love that. And, you know, hopefully this panel in itself is an inspiration, you know, and a reminder that of course, you know, they can do it, right? And it's not so much a matter of age, is not really a limit anymore, I would say. It used to be, and it's great to be, you know, part of this movement and to be able to say it's really not there's no limits anymore, you know, and so, you know, younger talent can just go for it, right? Barbara, I see you came on. We only have a couple of minutes left. So there were a few questions around recording. Will it be online? It will be online, but maybe can we tell approximately when?
Yes, so thank you all so much for participating. This has been really informative and really appreciate your time and your honesty. This has been recorded. We will be getting it out in a couple of days. And a couple of you mentioned some of the resources that we have. We'll put some links into that. Especially, we have this board matching platform, so you can go out and look for new board members if you're interested in it. And there is an onboarding and training module there. It's a 45-minute webinar, so that will be there as well. I encourage you all to check out that as well as the other resources on our website. And this is the third of a series of panels. So I hope you will all join us for the next one, which is April 21st, and is about successful leadership transition. And then on May 19th, we have a couple of board chair CEO partnerships. And we're going to talk about establishing a good leadership team with the board chair and CEO. So again, thank you all very much for coming. Thank you, panelists, for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
thank you.
Bye-bye.